Henry Gustav Molaison was born in 1926 in Manchester, Connecticut, into a quiet working-class family. By all accounts, his childhood was ordinary. He was polite, soft-spoken, and intelligent. He enjoyed school, cars, and tinkering with mechanical things. Nothing about his early life suggested that he would one day become one of the most important figures in the history of neuroscience. What set him apart was not who he was, but what would later be done to him, and what the world would learn as a result. When Molaison was 9 years old, he was struck by a bicycle while crossing the street. He hit his head hard on the pavement. At the time, he recovered without obvious complications, but a few years later, he began experiencing seizures. At first, they were mild, brief lapses that caused momentary confusion. Over time, they worsened. By his teenage years and into adulthood, the seizures became frequent and severe, often incapacitating him. Medications available in the 1940s and early 1950s offered little relief. The seizures interfered with his ability to work, to maintain independence, and to live anything resembling a normal adult life. By his mid-20s, Molaison's epilepsy was considered intractable. He experienced major seizures regularly, sometimes several per week. They left him exhausted and injured. He could not hold a steady job. His parents, particularly his mother, were deeply concerned about his future. In an era with limited treatment options, they sought out experimental solutions. This search led them to a neurosurgeon named William Scoville. Scoville believed that epilepsy could be alleviated by removing brain tissue thought to generate seizures. His approach was radical, but not entirely without precedent. In 1953, Scoville proposed a bilateral medial temporal lobe resection, a surgery that would remove large portions of the brain on both sides, including most of the hippocampus and surrounding structures. At the time, the hippocampus was not yet understood to play a central role in memory. It was thought to be involved primarily in emotion and smell. The prevailing belief was that removing it would not cause catastrophic cognitive harm. Molaison agreed to the surgery. There is no evidence that he fully understood the risks, nor that anyone truly understood them. On September 1, 1953, the operation was performed. The results were immediately striking. His seizures were dramatically reduced, but something else became clear just as quickly. Molaison could no longer form new memories. He could carry on a conversation normally. His language was fluent. His intelligence appeared unchanged. His personality remained gentle and cooperative. But minutes after an interaction ended, it was gone. He would meet someone, speak with them, and then greet them again moments later, as if for the first time. He could read the same magazine article over and over, reacting with surprise each time. If left alone in a room, he might pick up an object, examine it with interest, then forget why he was holding it. Molaison was not confused in the way many people imagine amnesia. He was not disoriented or distressed by his condition in the moment. Instead, he lived in a narrow window of awareness that constantly reset. His sense of time was fractured. He believed himself to be perpetually in his 20s or early 30s. He could not describe the events of the previous day, week, or year. Decades passed, but for him, they did not accumulate. What he retained was equally revealing. Molaison could remember his childhood clearly. He knew his parents, his early schooling, and events that occurred before the surgery. His memories had a cutoff point, a sharp boundary in time. Everything before was accessible. Everything after was fleeting. Researchers soon realized that his condition offered a rare opportunity to study memory in isolation. In 1957, a young neuropsychologist named Brenda Milner began working with Molaison. She administered a series of cognitive tests designed to assess learning and recall. The results were astonishing. When asked to memorize lists of numbers or words, Molaison failed consistently. He could not retain new information beyond a short interval. Yet when given tasks that required skill learning rather than conscious recall, he improved. One famous experiment involved mirror drawing. Molaison was asked to trace a shape while only seeing his hand in a mirror, a task that is difficult at first and improves with practice. Over repeated trials, Molaison's performance got better and better. His error rate declined. His speed increased. Each day, when asked if he had done the task before, he insisted he had not. He expressed surprise at how well he was doing. His hands learned, but his mind did not remember learning. This single dissociation changed neuroscience forever. It demonstrated that memory is not a single unified faculty. There are multiple memory systems, supported by different brain structures. Declarative memory, the kind that allows us to recall facts and events, depends on the hippocampus. Procedural memory, the kind that allows us to learn skills and habits, does not. Before Molaison, memory was often treated as a diffuse function of the brain, distributed and inseparable from intelligence. After Molaison, it became clear that memory could be selectively impaired while other cognitive abilities remained intact. Intelligence, language, perception, and personality could survive profound amnesia. Memory was something distinct, something that could be mapped. For the next 5 decades, Molaison lived a life of careful routine. He resided with his parents for many years, then later in supervised care facilities. He was cheerful, courteous, and remarkably patient. Researchers described him as cooperative and good-natured. He enjoyed simple pleasures, watching television, listening to music, doing puzzles. He could solve crosswords, but would forget the clues moments later. He could follow conversations, but not remember them afterward. To protect his privacy, he was referred to only by his initials, HM, in the scientific literature. For most of his life, he did not know that he was famous within neuroscience. He understood that he had memory problems, but not their significance. Each study session was, to him, a first meeting. Each explanation was new. Each goodbye was permanent, though he never experienced it as such. As decades passed, neuroscience advanced rapidly, built in part on insights derived from his condition. Researchers identified the medial temporal lobe as a critical hub for memory consolidation. They distinguished between short-term memory, long-term memory, episodic memory, semantic memory, and procedural memory. They began to understand how diseases like Alzheimer's progressively erode memory systems, often beginning in the hippocampus. Molaison's brain became a reference point. His deficits defined the boundaries of what the hippocampus does and does not do. When new imaging technologies emerged, researchers scanned his brain, correlating structural damage with functional loss. When new theories arose, they were tested against what HM could and could not do. Yet, throughout this scientific progress, Molaison himself remained unchanged. He did not accumulate experiences. He did not grow older in the way others do. He did not build a narrative of adulthood. His identity was anchored in a past that never updated. This raises a profound ethical question. Molaison gave the world unparalleled insight into the nature of memory, but he did so at an enormous personal cost. He could not consent to long-term participation in research in the way most subjects do, because he could not remember consenting. Each interaction required careful ethical oversight. Each study relied on the judgment of caregivers and researchers to act in his best interest. Some have argued that his life was exploited. Others point out that his care was stable, his treatment respectful, and his contributions invaluable. What is undeniable is that modern neuroscience would look very different without him. When Molaison died in 2008 at the age of 82, his death marked the end of an era, but not the end of his influence. After his passing, his brain was preserved, sectioned into thousands of thin slices, and digitally reconstructed. This painstaking process allowed scientists to map his brain in unprecedented detail, confirming the extent of the surgical damage and refining understanding of how specific structures relate to memory function. Even in death, Molaison continued to teach. His brain became a final dataset, offering clarity to questions that had lingered for decades. The hippocampus, once an obscure structure, now stood firmly at the center of memory science. His story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the relationship between knowledge and sacrifice. Scientific progress often advances through individual lives altered by disease, injury, or intervention. In Molaison's case, the advance was immense, and the cost was total. He lost the ability to remember his own contribution to human understanding. There is a quiet tragedy in that. While textbooks cite HM as foundational, while students learn his case as a cornerstone of neuroscience, the man himself lived without the reward of recognition or even awareness. He did not know that he mattered to the world. He did not know that his life changed how humanity understands the mind. And yet, there is also something deeply human in his story. Despite everything he lost, Molaison remained kind. He laughed, he engaged. He tried, again and again, to make sense of the moment he was in. Each present moment was complete in itself. Each interaction was sincere. In studying memory, science often focuses on storage, retrieval, and mechanisms. Molaison reminds us that memory is also continuity, identity, and time. To remember is not just to know facts, but to carry oneself forward, to accumulate meaning, to recognize that one's life has unfolded. Henry Gustav Molaison lived without that continuity, but through him, the rest of us gained a deeper understanding of what memory is, how fragile it can be, and why it matters. Settings. Use appropriate media. Make the background music appropriate to the script. Use a male voice for the narrator.